Hey, Randall, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad.
Good, good. So Randall, could we start out by getting an introduction to the listeners about yourself and what you're doing today as head of growth at Different?
Yeah, so Difrent are a business change and transformation delivery specialist, and we also specialize in service delivery. So we help organizations deliver and drive large scale business transformation projects where they're trying to transform some aspect of their operations, be it people, processes, or technology, so that they can better serve the needs of their end users. And on the other side of it, it is service delivery, where we specialize in delivering user-centered products and services to again meet the needs of users and achieve business objectives and outcomes, of course, as well. So we do that primarily within the healthcare and social care and government sectors in the UK. So we've worked with organisations like NHS Digital, Department for Health and Social Care, NHSX, and a variety of other great clients across the health and government sectors. And yeah, my role within that, I'm the head of growth, so I oversee our marketing and sales teams primarily to navigate our organization towards our growth objectives. However, I come from a product and delivery background, primarily, again, working across health and government products and services. And a lot of that feeds into the way in which I coordinate the team.
Very cool. So could you give the listeners just like a quick background on how you transitioned into like a product facing role? Because I know there's a lot of folks out there that are trying to figure that out. So could you give just like a quick overview of that journey?
Yeah, sure. So originally, I started my professional career in digital marketing, funnily
Okay.
enough. And I studied business and management and marketing at university. Before that, I was doing building small websites for local businesses, and yeah, always worked in some sort of a sales and marketing role. And then did that. Started out in search engine optimization for a couple of years. Did full 360 consultancy, as well as looking at the strategy. I was also delivering and implementing it. So rolled up my sleeves and got my hands dirty. Got very familiar with analytics and content and all the great stuff around SEO. Then not long after that, I got into a marketing role for a pan-European digital agency where we were doing end-to-end product and service delivery. And the within that role, I transitioned into that product ownership, product lead sort of role when we were looking to build the business and acquiring new clients in the sector and then having to deliver the work. So I ended up getting involved in a lot of those projects, using a lot of my previous experience in delivering web services to deliver these kind of larger scale web services for government organizations and arm's length bodies. And went from there, started learning about agile, started learning a lot about product ownership, started learning a lot about outcome driven delivery and working in a kind of lean agile way, and just implemented it in the work that we were doing, working with teams of user researchers, service designers, um, business analysts, and a whole variety of other roles as well, and of course developers and engineers, to ensure that we could iteratively build user-centered products based on data and kind of quantitative and qualitative research that would enable us to continuously iterate towards meeting those user needs. And yeah, eventually I found myself over the past kind of 5 years growing one of those businesses, founded a startup in the same sort of sector, ended up doing a bit of CX consultancy for a bit. So looking at bringing, turning traditional routes like telephony and email and all the kind of stuff that's been around for a while, and looking at things like chatbots and conversational AI and all that really great stuff that's more forward facing, or forward looking, sorry. And yeah, and then I've ended up here at Different as head of growth, where I ended up getting back into product delivery back in March when COVID hit.
Yeah, so tell us about that because you guys work in healthcare quite a bit, and so what was it like when COVID hit with your clients, and how did Different kind of fit into that response effort?
Yeah, it was an interesting time.
Yeah, I bet.
So yeah, so COVID, it was around kind of mid to end of March when COVID started heating up in the UK, and we started going into our peak, or our first peak. And yeah, at the time, we as our business, we were kind of adapting to the new situation. I mean, we're a remote first business anyway, but we started talking to our teams that are normally based on site, for example, in Newcastle, and other client locations, and started transitioning to primarily working from home, where clients were more used to having us on site, which is fine. You know, we can do on site remote, but that's where we started making some changes as soon as we saw things coming down the line that were coming our way. And then shortly after, we'd kind of transitioned everyone to completely offsite for all client work. We got a call from NHSX, who are one of the central NHS bodies in the UK, and the call we got was to provide 24 members of our team within 72 hours for 4 work streams, which were all going to be COVID-19 rapid response services that didn't exist. So it was all building stuff from scratch.
Wow.
And I put my hat in the ring, having that product ownership and delivery background, as we were looking across the team on who do we want to apply to this. And at the time, I was considering that marketing and sales activities is going to be very difficult. So um, best to kind of help where I can in terms of that effort. So I got assigned to one of the programs, which was for the coronavirus home test ordering service. And the challenge we were given by the deputy chief exec of NHSX was, we need you to build a home test ordering service in 7 days,
Hmm.
from scratch. So yeah, it kind of that's where it started. A lot of the focus was, the primary kind of outcome we were going for was to enable key workers who are in isolation to return to the front line faster than the 14-day isolation period in our guidance. And the situation at the time was that around 40% of NHS organisations were being reported as in isolation with unconfirmed COVID symptoms. And the knock-on effect to that was that the short staffing was increasing pressure on healthcare organisations. You've got a lot of people coming in with coronavirus symptoms, and you've also got to provide care to your existing patients. And yeah, the short staffing with unconfirmed symptoms was as an added pressure. So to relieve some of that pressure, the idea was to enable people from home to order test kits while they're isolating. And it might not be themselves, the key worker that was symptomatic, it could be a member of their household. But again, they didn't want, we couldn't have them going into their workplace, potentially spreading the virus if it was COVID from a member of their household. So yeah, the idea was to reduce some of that pressure by getting them to enabling them to order test kits from home, confirming whether or not them or their household members had coronavirus following symptoms showing, and then once they had their result confirmed as either positive or negative, they could decide on which course of action to take next. So whether they'd have to continue isolating because they had the virus, or if it was negative, they could return to work in safe in the knowledge that they didn't have it. So yeah, it was that was kind of the primary goal of what we were trying to do throughout that program.
Cool. So you started with your outcomes, which is super critical, right? Like getting those key workers to work faster. Um, but you had 7 days to do it, so you couldn't go through a lot of the typical cycles and validation, I would assume. So like, how did you guys approach that with such a tight window to respond to such a critical need? Uh, like starting
Yeah.
with your outcomes, how did you get down into like going from there to implementation?
Yeah, sure. So if I walk you through the timeline in that case, so because yeah, it was incredibly rapid delivery to try and get everything in place to be able to achieve that. And
Yeah.
the so initially the thing we were instructed was you need to build a home test ordering service within 7 days. And that didn't really kind of give us this kind of outcome led focus, something that's measurable, a goal that we could attain. So we needed to get to that state first. So what we did was on day one, we worked with the head of digital who'd been assigned as the program lead. There was myself and two others in a very lean delivery team. So I was covering product ownership, product ownership, delivery management, and also I've got an analytics background, so I covered off some of that as well. We had a service designer who also has user experience and interaction design and a variety of other design skills under his belt. And then we had a technical architect who also has strong delivery management skills with a massive experience in delivering outcomes within tight timeframes previously. So between the three of us, we on day one, we split off into three directions. I think we must have had something like 50 stakeholder interviews back to back on day one.
Wow.
And by stakeholders, it was people involved in standing up labs, people who were involved in providing test kits, Amazon logistics, because they were involved in this. So people involved in warehousing and logistics, courier companies, and just people across government organizations, the variety of different bodies, and other agencies that had also been roped into this for other aspects of delivering the overall program for testing. So it was an incredible amount of interviews we did on that first day. And my diary just was half hour, half hour, non-stop. And I remember being incredibly tired at the end of that day. And by the end of the day, we all got together, we pulled together our insights, and we started creating a service blueprint, which focused on the user journey, which we assumed. So we made some assumptions around what an ideal user journey would look like if we were a key worker and we needed to order a test kit. So we made a few assumptions around the sorts of things they need throughout the process. We were able to identify the vision, the goals, and the objectives on a personal level, as well as a kind of macro level of the program, from all those different stakeholders that we talked to. And we also got an understanding of what was currently in place, what was pending. So some of the labs hadn't been stood up at the time, but we identified that there was a lab that also provided test kits which we could use, who were called Randox. And yeah, we just identified from all of the information that we'd collated on that first day, if we bootstrapped a variety of stuff that could form a minimum viable product or a minimum viable end-to-end service, what would that look like based on those assumptions from the user journey? And we mapped that all out, all the different stakeholders that were involved at the different interaction points. And we had our end-to-end service blueprint. There were of course gaps where we had like gaps in our information where things hadn't been stood up yet or were pending, or we had question marks around how that would work. But we had enough to start asking more questions and to identify, like start delivering something towards this outcome. And actually that's the other key point. After we'd put together that blueprint, we then set to defining what would our actual outcome be that we could measure success against, which was what I mentioned earlier, to enable key workers who are in isolation to return to the front line faster following negative test results. So we'd done all that in the first day. It was an incredible amount of work to
Sounds like it.
squeeze one day, but we did. And then the second day was about defining the technical MVP for the digital aspect to the solution. So enabling people to go online, place an order, and receive a test kit that they could then return to the lab and get a result. So we worked closely with AWS. So AWS were assigned as whilst they're not normally assigned as a build partner, they were assigned as a build partner for this because the underlying infrastructure was going to be based on AWS. And we had a team of their engineers who hadn't previously worked together on any projects before as well. So it was new for a lot of them. And we had a bunch of their developers come together with us, and we collaborated to create this kind of single delivery team, working towards the service design, working towards the defined target outcomes. And we mapped out what the technical MVP would look like. So it was using infrastructure as code, A lot of it was based on AWS. It was all scalable, using best practice, and making best use of APIs to put together this solution. Um, and yeah, we defined all that on the second day. On the third day, we began building based on those assumptions and based on the service design. And on day 5, we'd created or we built an end-to-end solution that we tested and worked. We tested the end-to-end process by doing what we called empty box tests. So a box would get placed on a shelf, we'd ensure that it was selecting the right thing. It would go out of Virams and Logistics and it would be delivered to somebody's house. And once we were confident with that, we then went to present the end-to-end solution to the senior stakeholders involved in this end-to-end program. So we had people from all these different departments and all the different stakeholders coming together on day 5. And we gave them a demo of what we'd created. And from that point, the discussions were very positive. Everyone was proud of what we'd managed to achieve within such a short time frame. The rest of the time that we spent up to day 8 of the project from inception was just getting the whole thing into a live environment, because it was within a dev environment, setting up all of that stuff, making sure it had the gov.uk branding, ensuring it was on the gov.uk URLs and websites so that people could trust the service that they were going to, and also that's where we determined it would be the best place to host it. So we worked with the government digital service on getting that into that environment. And then on day 8, we achieved the outcome, which was key workers were able to go online and order test kits to have them sent to their house so they could take a sample and return it to the lab. And it was London Ambulance Service staff who were the first ones who tried it out. Now it's worth noting as well that we didn't just consider digital users in this. We also considered people with accessibility needs, non-digital users as well. So on the third day of the project, when we started building, I also created standard operating procedures for a call center, because that would be the quickest way for us to support those types of users. And the first version of our call center on day 8 with those London Ambulance Service London Ambulance Service staff was myself and my mobile phone on the mobile phone on the service, and me sat here with a script that I'd created for a call center. So if they ever dropped out of the journey, they could call it and I'd be able to support them through their journey. But we also tested the call center journey. So we asked people who were participating in this first trial to use the call center route as well as using the digital route. And yeah, it was very successful. They managed to order their test kits. Fortunately, all the results were negative. We did diary studies on the back of that to understand their end-to-end journey. So I mentioned that a lot of it was based on assumptions, but then we did diary studies and retrospective user research, looking at analytics, looking at continuous user research throughout that process once we'd actually got it live, to continue to iterate the service and make sure that it was meeting user needs through larger trials after day 8. And yeah, 1 month after inception, it was ready for being launched publicly. The government announced it via one of our briefings that we'd been having during the time, saying, key workers can go order test kits here. And that's when you started seeing the analytics go nuts, which is really good fun. I remember on day of live launch, I'm sat there, we've got all the dashboards, and we're waiting for it to hit the time when we were going for release, and it was a soft launch initially, until we got the announcement, and you just saw the numbers just go, and it was incredible. And the service stood up incredibly well, didn't fall over at all. But test kits did go out the door because there's a certain capacity that you can have. Test kits went out incredibly quickly in that first launch, which we addressed over time to make sure there was an even distribution of those for people at different times in the day. And then 2 weeks after launch, we were asked shortly after we got it live for key workers, can you make this available for all UK citizens? And yeah, we adapted the service. 2 weeks later, it was live for all UK citizens to order test kits. And yeah, within 3 months, about 1 million kits went out.
That's insane. I mean, you're working in healthcare, you're working with the government and all the regulation and red tape that's typically associated with that. Was that just like all knocked down for you guys to be able to run quickly, or like what do you think enabled the success? Because I think about like my own experience and trying to get like one feature out of the door and hearing that like you had something up and functional to that scale in a week, and then being able to iterate after a month to where like this was like flying, right? It sounds incredible. So what were some of the things that enabled that success for you guys to move so quickly?
I think there's quite a few things that were in our favor. So, for any kind of meaningful change to get everyone's buy-in, I think there has to be some sort of what I call a burning platform, but under the things we're trying to do. So, the situation of COVID-19 meant that everyone was, willing to get involved, wanted to do their best for. Initially, it was for our key workers, which obviously would have an impact on citizens, so doing the best that they could to reduce pressure to ensure that we were able to support the national effort where possible.
Yeah,
So I think everyone's mindset was around, yeah, we need to do this. So everyone was motivated, which is good. Um, I think one of the things that we did early on by defining the outcome was we put a bit of a narrative around the outcome as well. So my uh, myself and a few other members of the delivery team, we've got family who worked in the NHS, so we were able to take some of those personal stories on what the actual real life impact would be of delivering this service and making that tangible to everyone. So,
nice.
explaining that 40% of staff being in isolation was one thing, but the real making sure that people were completely aware of what the real life effect of that would be, I think was key in winning hearts and minds from the start from the variety of stakeholders across the program. And the narrative that we put together really was that, so I know that my mum could probably see about 20 patients in a shift. The knock-on effect of her being out and in isolation for 14 days without getting tested would be that those 20 patients per day could potentially not be treated. And if there are COVID patients, then the risk is even higher. So it just really hit home the human impact and the human cost of what would happen if we couldn't, move quickly enough. And that really focused people on, okay, what do you need us? This is what we need to achieve. What do you need us to do? So that was another key thing, I think, focusing on the outcome and putting a good um, tangible narrative around it that people could buy into. Uh, the only other thing I'd say as well is that the client that we were working with, they were open to trying a few things. So, they challenged us doing it in 7 days. They knew that they'd need to give us some free reign to be able to do that. So they made things happen quickly around us regarding, checking with policy teams, checking with clinicians, checking with data protection specialists, all that sort of stuff to ensure that any issues that we found or any blockers that we found in delivering this stuff would get resolved incredibly quickly. And I definitely commend the head of digital who was working with us for being that person who managed to remove a lot of those blockers so that we could just crack on and deliver.
Yeah,
Um, so I think those are kind of three key things, and there's kind of an understanding that if we focus on trying to achieve the outcome, the thing that we're doing in the middle is almost like a bit of an experiment based on some really good grounded information that we've based the work that we're doing on, and then just trying it out and seeing how it goes, I guess. And that's what we did. We hit the nail on the head, I think, with what we delivered, and then it was just about making everyone understand it's not perfect now, but we're not trying to achieve perfect. We're trying to achieve something that achieves the outcome.
right.
What we'll do every single day, which we did, we deployed a new thing every single day, be it like something technical and back house features that nobody would see, or be it something public facing that would enable the service to again better meet user needs on an ongoing basis every single day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think a lot of companies will say that they're customer centric and that they're focused on outcomes, but I think the way that you articulated what you guys did really drives home the power and impact of if you're truly focused on your customer outcomes, and that phrase that you used about like what happens, what's the knock-on effect if we don't do this, right? What is the impact to the human life if we don't do this? And I think whether you're talking in a consumer setting, a business setting, a healthcare setting, Um, the reason why our software lives is to improve human life. At least that's the altruistic way to look at software development, right? That's my hope, is that software is being built to improve life in a bunch of arenas. So, like, do you think if we really kind of internalize that across our companies, across our teams, that we would see better software getting to market faster?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think um, as they say, necessity is the mother of all invention. And if you can identify what that need is and the personal impact of that need and the situational context that surrounds, products and services, then you can um, make more of an impact towards people's lives through the work that you do. And 100% getting everyone aligned around what is it we're trying to achieve collaboratively is key. And I think there's also an element of looking at how organizations are structured, and the ways in which um, they operate, to ensure that, yeah, okay, it's good to be outcome focused and all the rest of it, but the way that the organization operates also needs to be open and collaborative enough and not siloed, so that people are given the ability to focus on those things and bring their skills and experience to the table in order to help solve some of those challenges, rather than being siloed, penned into one particular area. So, where you got your traditional, that's the marketing team, that's the sales team, that's the development team, that's the product team. There's like too many silos, rather than trying to create a collaborative environment around those outcomes.
Absolutely. No, I definitely see that play out in practice, where too many people are focused in their lane and kind of shy away from, or even discourage people from kind of putting their hands in other people's lanes. But really, like, we're one company focused on one outcome. Um, it's that one team, one heartbeat mentality that I think is
Yeah.
lacking from a lot of companies, but we would definitely benefit from. So outside of like breaking down silos and customer focused outcomes, which are huge, are there any other like big takeaways that you got from like what you guys accomplished with Different?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is to ensure that you are measuring success with what you're doing. So understanding whether or not you are delivering towards the vision that you set out to achieve. I think utilizing data effectively is another key thing. So there is a temptation, I think, for some user researchers to or people undertaking user research into user needs to take those kind of relatively small samples within which they might have interviews with, or samples of surveys, and then deducing that it means that everyone, like if they find something, they'll like a certain user trait or a user behavior, that everyone does it, rather than utilizing analytics of live services running to show you exactly what is happening on a large scale.
Yeah.
Um, so, I think one of the things that came up at some point was an assumption that um, because we offered, I think it was up to 5 test kits you could get on one single order, because the offer was there, that most people would be ordering the maximum number of test kits, and
Mhm.
capacity was a key thing in this, to ensure that people ordering test kits that they actually needed at the time when they're symptomatic. Um, Now that assumption, from a purely qualitative research basis, um, was deduced from, I think, something like 5 interviews that a team of user researchers had. And it's worth noting that not our user researchers, there were teams of user researchers all over the program that interacted with us and with our service designer. Um, so I remember there was a bit of research that came out that said, most people order um, the majority number of test kits. So it didn't sound right to me. So we went back and looked at the data, and we actually found that from the thousands of people that were making orders, it was probably 1 or 2 test kits that were actually being ordered, and a
Okay.
very small percentage that were ordering the maximum number.
Hmm.
So I guess the point that I'm making there really is, it's important to take that qualitative research, combine it with quantitative research, to understand, what's actually happening through the data, what the actual behaviors that you're seeing, what are the how wide scale are some of the behaviors you're seeing, and then using qualitative research to sit alongside that to understand the why, and the context and the reasoning that surrounds some of that. So again, that you can continuously improve that service um, based on what's actually happening with your live product. The only other thing I'd say as well is that a lot of companies don't utilize their call centers effectively enough.
Hmm.
So the way that we'd set up the call center in the second week of the program was, rather than it be your traditional call center that's just, serving customer inquiries and all that sort of stuff, um, we made sure that the reporting, we could get hourly and daily reporting, because we were working at speed, on what were some of the recurring themes that the inquiries were coming in about, so that we could then move quickly to adapt the service, be it, changing a feature, a problem that's coming down the line for people with certain browsers or whatever. We could see from the feedback we were getting from the call center, via common themes, what we needed to prioritize our efforts on as we were developing every single day and deploying every single day. So I think if you structure your call center right, it can be an incredibly useful research tool as well, that feeds into understanding user needs, so that you can rapidly iterate your products on an ongoing basis as well.
For sure. And I think that kind of complements what we were talking about earlier with breaking down silos, right? Like if we're one company focused on delivering one key outcome or multiple key outcomes, regardless, right? We should all be pushing towards that and using the insights that each of us are getting, and the skill sets and competencies that each of us have to all push towards that. And that shouldn't stay in that one part of the organization. Like you develop that part to complement the whole. But I think that's been, as we said before, kind of forgotten.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the whole practice of CX design quite often ends up looking at what are your customer services operations, what is happening within your call center, and the contact channels. When in reality, CX design, if it's like user centered design from where it kind of derives from, it should be a whole organization thing. It shouldn't just be the customer service team that's responsible for it and bringing in specialists and focusing on that area. It should be every single part of your organization understanding who are the users, what are their needs, what are their pain points, what are their journeys, all of that stuff, so that you can structure the way in which you operate around those and continuously meet those as a collective.
Absolutely. Well, Randall, I really appreciate you coming on, man. This story is compelling. There's tons of great takeaways that I've gotten from this, and I know that the viewers and listeners have gotten from this. So thank you for coming on. Are there any parting thoughts that you would give to, let's say, that aspiring product manager who's looking to get in, and anything that you would point to, or advice that you would give?
I think one thing I would always recommend is look into different ways in which you can engage stakeholders, because a key thing that you're trying to do is set vision, set roadmaps, get people to buy into what you're trying to achieve, and build business cases around that. So there are a lot of different techniques out there, from things like Wardley mapping and 7 questions, and loads of other really interesting techniques that are used by management consultants and others in that field. So get familiar with some of those, see what works for you, and ultimately what you're trying to do is build that buy-in from all of those stakeholders in the first place, so that you can build an effective business case and utilize data, of course, around that as well where possible, so that you can prove return on investment for the things that you're trying to get people to invest in. And I think that those are my two kind of key things I'd say. Get really good at that stuff, because once you master that, you can then, the rest of it is really simple as far as I'm concerned.
Cool. Well, that's perfect advice, Randall. Thanks again for coming on, and I appreciate you sharing with me and with the listeners and viewers.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.